talk about three things to work on when you're practicing the flute, and specifically when you are working on embouchure. The first one is picking certain notes and working on those and getting the tone to be just great on three specific notes, okay? First one is C sharp. Why that of all notes? Because it's the easiest one to hit. You don't have any holes covered, the note just kind of comes out. So, that's the one you want to experiment with both on tone and on tuning. And to do that, you're rolling the flute inside and out. You can hear how it, one, changes pitch. It gets flatter as you roll it towards you and gets sharper as you roll it away. And eventually it doesn't sound at all because your angle is lost, either too sharp or too flat across the flute. I don't know. The angle is wrong. That's the gist of it. So use that note because it requires the least amount of breath. It's the easiest to hit. And it'll give you enough time, hopefully, to spend with that to get it to sound like it should. Nice and clear, in tune, good volume, good control, good breath control. If you're hearing a lot of air coming through that note, it usually just means that your embouchure is not focused enough. So try and use that note as an opportunity to really rein it in. As an example, you hear how some of that air goes out of that note from the more wider embouchure to a more narrow one. That's what you want to be working on. Now, you're obviously still going to be focusing on those things when we talk about these other two notes, but we're looking at it a little bit differently. The F sharp is the next one to work on. And I picked that one because it's the loudest note. It's got the largest hole. That F sharp hole, that's typically the largest one on any flute, or at least it should be. And it's going to have a nice strong tone. And it's an important one in Irish music because there's so many tunes in D and A major that will definitely rely on the F sharp. So same thing here. Nice clean tone, and hold that note as long as you can. You should ideally start to hear a little bit of a bite to it, which we're going to get to when we talk about the low D. But that's one of the advantages of the wooden flute, I would say, over the silver flute, is that it's got a bit of that character to it that you can adjust and you can affect by changing your embouchure. So play with that note too, experiment with that, see if you can get that sort of tone out of it. Now the last note is the note D. That's arguably the most important one to get right. It's also the most difficult one. The reason being because it's the longest distance that the air has to travel down the flute, and there's a lot of variability to that note, a lot of different tones that you can get. But you can hear how it's got a little bit more of that bite than even the F sharp did. It's got some kind of growl to it. There's a lot you can do with that note, and that's why it's the one you need to spend a lot of time on, because it's very easy to miss that note just as you're playing along, where it just loses the same level of quality that you might get tonally out of some of the other notes. So make sure you spend a good bit of time just playing the bottom D. Get a good solid tone. Nice and in tune, nice and even. It's not, you don't have to worry about breath vibrato with this instrument, with Irish music. I wouldn't worry about that just yet. You can obviously add that in, but make sure you get nice clean tone first of all. Now, talking of the low D, the other lesson number 2 or tip number 2 we're going to talk about is the different tones that you can get out of that. Now, when you're first starting out, you're probably playing with a sort of a softer embouchure that may have a bit more air to it, where you can hear the note, and hopefully it's in tune and it's nice and clean, but there's sort of some air that's maybe getting wasted or lost on either side of that. I like to hear that as the main melody note and then kind of sandwiched with a cushion of extraneous air. And our goal is to remove that and just get to the note, or at least be able to choose when we want to do that. And that's what we're talking about here, going from this to this, and then to this, where you can sort of push that envelope between the low D and the high D to give it that kind of a growly sort of a buzz. It's trademark of this particular instrument in this style of music. That's the reason why more often than not you'll see people playing wooden flutes as opposed to silver flutes. You can just get a bit more of that tone control with the way that you adjust your embouchure. And it's just a nature of the wood, I think. It's just a nature of the instrument in the way that it's made. conical bore versus cylindrical bore, all that stuff. So the exercise here then is try to hit all of those different types of notes. A more breathy one, while still, again, in tune and in control. Then the more kind of clear, refined one. And then the real growly one, where it's almost got those overtones of the next octave. That's sort of what you're going for. So try those, and again, just like the previous exercise, nice and slow. Hold the notes out. Don't be in a big hurry to kind of run through the whole thing. The exercise here and the point of all this is really more for your brain than anything else. Getting your mouth muscles trained to just do that without really having to think about it a whole lot. That's the idea. The last thing that I want to talk about, the last trick as far as embouchure goes, is controlling the attack notes. The attack notes are the ones that would happen at the start of a phrase. And the problem that a lot of folks run into, myself included, I've noticed when I listen back to my older playing, is that as I would take a breath and start the next phrase, hit that next note, I would punch it. So where I'm in such a hurry to get back and start playing again that I'm not really thinking about how much air am I putting into that note. Do I want that note to be accented? Now, keep in mind, sometimes you do. When you take a breath, you want to hit that next note intentionally and stronger than the one that you just left. But more often than not, you want those phrases to be a lot smoother, and controlling that landing note, the amount of breath you're using on that landing note, is key to that. So when you're playing, the most important thing is play everything slow. So same volume, right? From between, in that case, the D, as I take a breath, landing on that next note in an appropriate volume, one that I'm deciding, that I'm intentionally saying how much volume I want to use. Playing slowly is the key to that, because it'll also force you to have to take more breaths. As you're playing faster, you don't need as much air. So if you play slower, it'll make you think a little bit more about that phrasing. And as you land on those notes, how hard are you hitting that? Be intentional about it. That's the main point. Hopefully this is of some value to you guys. Let me know. Let me know what you think. How's it coming for y'all with embouchure practice? It's vitally important to playing this instrument, so hopefully it's going well. Let me know if this made a difference. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.